This case begins with a crime so disturbing that it sends shockwaves far beyond one Ohio neighborhood. It is the story of a woman who rebuilt her life after divorce, a respected dentist devoted to his family, and an ex-husband now accused of committing an unthinkable act. Michael Meeke once lived a life many would describe as successful. He was a trained vascular surgeon living in a luxury high-rise apartment in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood. His career placed him among the medical elite, and on the surface, nothing about his lifestyle suggested the nightmare he would soon face. Today, that life is gone. Meeke now sits behind bars, accused of murdering his ex-wife Monique Tepe and her husband, Dr. Spencer Tepe, inside their Columbus, Ohio home. Prosecutors allege the killings took place in the early morning hours of December 30, when the couple was at home with their two young children. The children, ages 4 and 1, were not physically harmed, a detail that has left many struggling to understand how such violence could occur in a home where children were sleeping just rooms away. At this stage, investigators have not publicly laid out every detail of their case. However, what has emerged paints a grim picture. Authorities believe Meeke drove for hours from Illinois to Ohio, entered the home during the night, and fatally shot both victims before returning to Illinois. The motive remains unclear, but as investigators continue piecing together the timeline, attention has turned to Meeke's past, especially his marriage to Monique. Years earlier, Michael Meeke and Monique Sabatersky, as she was then known, appeared to be starting a promising future together. Both attended Ohio State University and were close in age. Meeke pursued medicine, eventually graduating from medical school in 2014, while Monique supported him during those demanding years. The couple married in August 2015. Wedding photos from that day show smiling faces and hopeful expressions, images that now feel haunting in retrospect. Soon after the wedding, the couple moved to Virginia, where Meeke continued his medical training. But according to court records, the marriage began to unravel quickly. Less than 2 years after tying the knot, Monique filed for divorce in Ohio. In May 2017, she cited incompatibility as the reason for ending the marriage. At the time, the couple had no children, and the divorce proceeded quietly and quickly. Within weeks, the marriage was legally over. There were no explosive court battles, no public accusations, and no drawn-out disputes. On paper, it appeared to be a clean break. Both parties went their separate ways. Meeke continued his medical career, holding licenses in multiple states and eventually settling into work in Illinois. Monique, meanwhile, returned to Ohio, where her life would take a dramatically different turn. It was after her divorce that Monique met Spencer Tepe, a dentist and fellow Ohio State graduate. Friends say the two quickly formed a strong bond, building a life filled with warmth, laughter, and community. They married, had 2 children, and settled into a modern townhome in Columbus. According to those who knew them, their home was often filled with friends and family. They were the kind of couple others gravitated toward, welcoming, energetic, and deeply committed to their children. That life was shattered in the early hours of December 30. As this case unfolds, investigators, legal experts, and the public are left asking the same questions. What happened inside that home? Why now? And what could drive someone to allegedly commit such violence years after a divorce had ended?
To understand the prosecution's theory, it is necessary to look closely at the divorce between Michael Meeke and Monique, a separation that occurred years before the alleged murders. Court documents show that Monique filed for divorce in Franklin County, Ohio in May 2017. At the time, she had been living in Ohio for several months, while Meeke remained in Virginia completing his surgical residency. The reason listed for the divorce was simple: incompatibility. Legally, this term is common. It does not require proof of wrongdoing, abuse, or misconduct. Instead, it reflects a determination that the marriage is no longer workable. Within weeks, the divorce was finalized. According to the separation agreement, Meeke retained the home the couple had shared in Virginia, along with responsibility for the mortgage and related debt. Each kept their own vehicle, and neither sought spousal support. Perhaps most striking is the clause stating that each party was entitled to privacy and freedom from interference in their personal lives. Neither was permitted to enter the other's residence without permission. At the time, this language likely seemed routine. Today, it reads like a grim foreshadowing. On paper, the divorce appeared amicable. There were no children, no prolonged court disputes, and no public conflict. Both parties signed the final documents, formally ending the marriage. Legal experts note that such divorces are often faster precisely because one or both parties want to move on quickly. That does not mean emotional wounds have healed. After the divorce, McKee continued advancing his medical career. Records show he worked in multiple states and maintained active licenses in Illinois and California. At the time of his arrest, he was living alone in a luxury apartment and commuting to a medical facility in Rockford, Illinois. Neighbors later described him as quiet and reserved, someone they rarely saw interacting with others. Monique's life took a very different path. After returning to Ohio, she met Spencer Tepe. Their relationship blossomed, and together they built a family. Friends describe Monique as thriving, a devoted mother who embraced her role at home while supporting her husband's dental career. To outsiders, the past marriage seemed firmly behind her. What investigators are now trying to determine is whether it was truly over for everyone involved. The truth about what happened inside the Tepe home did not surface immediately. Instead, it unfolded slowly through missed calls, growing concern, and a chain of decisions that ended in devastating discovery. December 30th began like any other workday at Spencer Tepe's dental practice in Ohio. Appointments were scheduled, staff arrived, and patients waited, but Spencer never showed up. At first, coworkers assumed there might be a delay. Dentists, like many professionals, occasionally run late. But as time passed, the unease grew. Phone calls to Spencer went unanswered. Text messages showed no response. Attempts to contact his wife, Monique, also failed. Those who worked closely with Spencer knew this was not normal. He was known as dependable and punctual, someone who took his responsibilities seriously. His unexplained absence immediately raised alarm. Spencer's employer, who was traveling out of state, was notified of the situation. After hearing that neither Spencer nor Monique could be reached, he made the difficult decision to contact emergency services and request a welfare check at the family's Columbus residence. An officer was dispatched to the area, but due to a critical error, the officer went to the wrong address. Finding no cause for concern, the call was cleared, leaving the Tepe home unchecked. Meanwhile, worry among friends continued to intensify. By late morning, several close friends of the couple decided they could not wait any longer. They drove to the home themselves, hoping to find a simple explanation, a medical emergency, a phone malfunction, anything that made sense. They knocked on the front door. No answer. They tried the back door. Still nothing. Then they heard something that made their hearts drop. From inside the home, faint sounds of children could be heard. Panicked, one of the friends called 911, explaining that the children seemed to be inside alone and no adults were responding. The dispatcher advised officers were on the way. Before help arrived, the situation took a tragic turn. Someone inside the group managed to see into the bedroom, and what they saw confirmed their worst fears. Spencer Tepe was lying motionless near the bed. Blood was visible. There was no sign of movement. Another frantic call to 911 followed. When officers arrived and entered the home, they quickly realized the scale of the tragedy. Spencer had been shot multiple times and was pronounced dead at the scene. In another room, police discovered Monique Tepe, also fatally wounded by a gunshot to the chest. Their two children, just 4 years old and 1 year old, were found alive, physically unharmed, but alone in a house that had become a crime scene. Investigators immediately secured the home and began processing evidence. Shell casings from a 9mm firearm were recovered, but the weapon itself was not found.
Even more troubling, police reported no signs of forced entry. That detail raised chilling questions. How did the killer enter the home? Was the door unlocked, or did the person know how to get inside? As detectives worked through the evidence, they began narrowing the timeline. Based on forensic analysis and digital data, authorities believe the murders occurred sometime between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. The investigation was only beginning, but already the case had taken a dark and disturbing turn.
With no forced entry and no immediate suspect, detectives turned to technology to uncover what happened during the early morning hours of December 30th. The neighborhood surrounding the Taipei home was equipped with multiple security cameras. Doorbell cameras, alleyway surveillance systems, and nearby traffic cameras all became crucial pieces of the investigation. As detectives reviewed hours of footage, a key image emerged. Video showed a hooded figure walking through an alley behind the Taipei residence during the early morning hours. The individual appeared cautious, keeping their head down and avoiding direct camera angles. The timing of the footage aligned closely with the suspected window of the murders. Investigators publicly released the video, asking for assistance in identifying the individual. But behind the scenes, they were already following another critical lead. Surveillance footage also captured a vehicle arriving near the home shortly before the murders and leaving shortly afterward. Using license plate readers and traffic camera data, detectives began tracking the vehicle's movements. That trail led out of Ohio. According to court documents, the vehicle was tracked traveling west, eventually crossing state lines and heading toward Illinois. Investigators determined the car was linked to Michael McKee, Monique's ex-husband. Authorities allege McKee drove more than 6 hours from Illinois to Ohio, arrived during the night, and left shortly after the killings. The vehicle was later spotted near his residence in Rockford, Illinois. Just days after the murders, police arrested McKee in Illinois. Neighbors were stunned. Many described him as quiet, reserved, and polite. Nothing about his demeanor suggested involvement in a violent crime. McKee appeared in court shortly after his arrest for an extradition hearing. The proceeding was brief and nearly silent. Wearing a jail-issued jumpsuit, McKee stood before the judge and confirmed his identity. He waived his right to contest extradition, agreeing to be transferred back to Ohio. Legal experts note that such a decision is common and does not indicate guilt. Waiving extradition allows a defendant to move more quickly into the legal process and begin preparing a defense. McKee now faces 2 counts of aggravated premeditated murder, charges that carry the possibility of life imprisonment. Prosecutors argue the alleged cross-state drive, surveillance evidence, and timing demonstrate planning and intent. The defense, however, is expected to challenge every aspect of that narrative. As the case moves forward, forensic evidence, digital records, and witness testimony will determine whether prosecutors can turn probable cause into proof beyond a reasonable doubt. While court proceedings and evidence dominate headlines, the true weight of this case is carried by those left behind. Spencer and Monique Taipei were more than names in a criminal complaint. They were parents, friends, and deeply involved members of their community. Those who knew them describe a couple devoted to their children and committed to building a loving home. Spencer was passionate about his career as a dentist, often going above and beyond for patients. Colleagues say he took pride in mentoring others and running his practice with integrity. Monique, with a background in early childhood education, dedicated herself fully to raising their children. Friends describe her as warm, creative, and thoughtful, someone who valued family above all else. Their lives ended suddenly and violently, leaving behind 2 children too young to understand what they lost. The children were physically unharmed, but experts emphasize that the emotional impact of losing both parents at such a young age can last a lifetime. family members quickly stepped in to provide care and stability. In the days following the murders, a GoFundMe campaign was launched to support the children's future. The response was overwhelming, with hundreds of thousands of dollars raised, a reflection of how deeply Spencer and Monique were loved. The Tepe family released a statement expressing gratitude to law enforcement and the community. They emphasized that while no arrest can undo the loss, accountability matters, not only for their family, but for the children who deserve answers one day. As the case moves toward trial, many questions remain unanswered. What motivated the alleged crime years after a divorce? Was there warning behavior that went unnoticed? Could this tragedy have been prevented? Those answers may come out in court, or they may remain forever unknown. For now, the focus remains on justice, truth, and protecting the innocent lives left behind. Spencer and Monique were remembered not for the violence that ended their lives, but for the love they shared and the family they built.